Sorry? It's a nice combination of his own experiences and then drawing some very powerful lessons. And good Torah. Yeah, he was a good piece of work. You know, and the problem is when you're a school rabbi, you're not in the habit of writing sermons week to week. So it takes some doing to sort of get yourself up to that. Yeah. It's a wonderful talk. Good morning. Shabbat Shalom. Hey. Ooh. Good morning. Mark, you want to do me a favor?
Absolutely.
Just pass these around.
You never make everybody happy with the air conditioning anyway. It doesn't make a difference.
Yeah, I had a dream about that last night. That's how bad it is. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Shabbat Shalom. I hope that you and your homes are safe. I hope that everybody has a place. We made about 200 phone calls yesterday just to make sure anyone who lives in the zip codes that have been affected by the fire has a place. And thankfully, many families, we responded to the email we sent and said, you know, we have rooms, send us families. But so far, we haven't had to displace anybody. But if anyone has needs, if you're out of your home, if you have any needs at all, let us know. There's lots of families ready to help. Okay? Okay, let's go. As well, be very careful being outside. Try not to breathe. It's very dangerous. They say if you can see the smoke, it's bad for you. We can see the smoke. So in case you were looking for another excuse not to have to exercise, here you go. It could kill you. Stay home, eat chocolate, watch television. It's much safer. Don't you think? It's much safer, much safer. Much safer. Okay, couple of announcements of things going on with us. Following our Torah study today, you're all welcome. There's a wonderful kid having her bat mitzvah. The oldest of the Jablon girls is having her bat mitzvah. And upstairs there's library minyan, there's Tat Shabbat, Teen Torah, and a nice kiddush. And then there'll be Parsha group this afternoon. I think there's Parsha group this afternoon. I imagine there would be, right? And then there's another bat mitzvah this afternoon. This coming week, we begin the holiday of Sukkot, which is a wonderful holiday. If it's not burning, it's a wonderful holiday. So you'll see they're getting the Sukkot of the synagogue ready. Sunday night, the holiday begins. As we'll talk about this in just a moment. So find yourself a sukkah to have a meal and gather friends together. The synagogue, on Wednesday and Thursday, we do have lunch and learn. The Wednesday lunch and learn is going to be here with Chazak, and the Thursday lunch and learn where it usually meets, okay? And then there's all kinds of groups in Chavarot having sukkah things all during the week. So please come and join us for those. Next Shabbos, we will have Torah study as usual, and then shul, and then Kiddush that day is in honor of Ron Lever's birthday. And we want to wish Ronnie happy birthday and many, many, many long good years of health and strength and celebration. So please come next week and we'll celebrate Ron's birthday. Guys, come on in.
Can I move this vehicle?
Yeah, Pop, they're going to move you. It's okay. Nothing serious there.
You get moved for Nikki.
Jeffrey's a doctor. He knows what he's doing here. Yeah. It's okay. There we go. There we go. It's okay. I can't talk that loud. So I have nothing much to say. The way I talk and the way she hears, it's a perfect match.
Quite an entrance. That's quite an entrance.
I'm telling you. Come on in. That's okay. Don't worry about it.
We got delayed at Shabbos.
You have to pay for that. You have to pay for that fender.
Nish Geferla.
It's over there.
How you doing, Mazel Tov? You're next Sunday. Yeah, with my dog.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Theo's looking forward to it. He has a new tie.
But people are coming dressed.
Well, my dog's coming dressed, so good. Okay, good. Let's see, the 17th, which I think is Thursday night, right? APAC. We have the APAC evening. And that night, our guest is going to be Professor Steve Burke from upstate New York. Steve's a wonderful teacher, a really wonderful teacher. And he'll be talking about Jewish power and powerlessness. Very, very wonderful. He's a professor of Jewish history, professor of political science, but he's an expert in Jewish history. He's a really great teacher. So please come and share that with us. It would be wonderful. Okay, you had a question?
It's so simple. I had a non-Jewish friend over for Shabbat. She asked me why they're two candles. She also almost blew them out. She said, "Oh my goodness, what would you do if I had them out and light them?"
You'd sing happy birthday. That's what you'd do. I mean, what do you mean? What would you do? Hang on one second. Let me get all the announcements down. Did I miss any announcements? Yes, I did it.
Is Thursday 7 or 7:30?
The registration is at 7. They'll be open at 7, but the program isn't going to start till 7:30. So if you get here early, there's a reception. There's cookies and cakes. And then at 7:30, we'll start the program. And they'll have a couple of speeches, and then Steve's going to speak for a half an hour, and then I get to ask him some questions. He's really worth listening to. Whether or not you're into APAC, this is a guy who really has a wonderful, clear perspective on the world. And he's terrific. So you don't have to pay. It's free to come. If you can RSVP, it'll get you through security quicker. Okay?
Simplest Torah is going to be new and different.
Yeah, what we're doing is, so the following week, so next week, of course, we'll have Torah study, and then that week we have Shmini Atzeret is Sunday night. Monday, we'll have Yizkor services Monday morning. So Monday night is Simchas Torah. We're going to be out in the new building, a very special celebration of the Torah. We have
We're planning it different.
buckets of kids.
It's going to be real fun.
Yeah, a lot of fun, a lot of joy. So come and celebrate Simchat Torah. And then the following week, we start all over again with Breshit. We get to start at Genesis and create the world and wonder what those two trees were doing in the garden. Surely.
Is the APAC lecture
Yeah.
going to be streamed?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I do what they tell me to do, so it turns out Yom Kippur was streamed. I didn't even know that. They streamed Yom Kippur, so you could have stayed home in bed. You didn't have to come to shul. People tell me all the time, I watch you in my pajamas on Saturday mornings. So I say, what was I doing in your pajamas on Saturday morning? I think one morning we ought to all come in our pajamas. And we ought to laugh at the camera and say, yeah, so there, Yes, please, Bobby.
So Canterbury was saying something about
Yes. So here's what come on in. We'd love to have you. There's plenty of room. Aren't you guys here with Avi? What do you need? This person. Okay, good. That's fair. Okay. The first weekend in November, we're going to be welcoming a teacher, Rabbi Yoel Glick from Israel, who's a world-renowned teacher of Jewish meditation. And that morning, there's a that day, there's a Shabbaton for those who would like to learn about the traditions of Jewish meditation. There'll be regular stuff that day, Torah study and services, but for those who are in the meditation minyan and those who have been coming to to Cantor Barron's meditation groups, and those who would like to learn about this, Rabbi Glick is a world-renowned teacher, has some wonderful wisdom to share, and it's available to everybody. It's free. So a weekend, a morning of learning with one of the great meditation teachers, okay? And we'll.
He said something about a dinner on Friday night.
That I don't know. That it'll be publicized. I'm sure there's a dinner on Friday night somewhere, okay? Whether it's here or not, I couldn't tell you. Okay? All right, then the year is starting. Thank God, finally, Okay, once again, if anyone is, I hope that you're safe in your home. Anyone who lives in the north of the valley, if you've been told you're in evacuation watch and need some help, let us know. If you've been evacuated and need some help, let us know. All right, a question. So the question here was, why do we light 2 Shabbos candles? What happens if you blow them out? So 2 Shabbos candles. Nowhere in the Torah does it tell you to light Shabbos candles. In the Talmud, you light candles, and it looks to me, you can tell me if I'm wrong about this, it looks to me, I'm sure you will, it looks to me like the tradition was because you were not permitted to light candles on Shabbat. You lit candles before Shabbat, and you had light in your home over the course of Shabbat. Over time, these became less utilitarian and more traditional as a sign of the light of Shabbat entering your home. So you light the candles ritually before Shabbat, right? It's one of the interesting things. So when you do something, you're typically supposed to say the bracha and then do the thing, right? If you're eating something, you say motzi and then you eat, right? But here, what you do is once you light the candles and then you close your eyes to pretend they're not lit, and then you say the bracha. That's why you're supposed to close your eyes, because you flip it the other way around. So you say the bracha, and you add light to your home. Now, if the candles go out, you're not permitted to rekindle them. You're not supposed to put them out, because that's also part of the rule. Part of the rule is that you don't light fires on Shabbat, and you don't put them out on Shabbat. But once you've put them out, b'di'evid, you don't relight them again. You just leave them alone. 2, my mother used to light 3, and I've seen most people light 2, and then there is a tradition. There's a tradition that you light an extra one for every child in the family. I've seen that. So I have Orthodox friends who have a lot of candles. And then I've seen traditions where you light one for every relative who's passed away. I've seen that tradition also. So I think that's more custom than it is official tradition. There's a Midrash on that, yeah?
It's really, really bad. You want to hear it?
No, it's okay.
All right, I'll tell you.
No, it's okay. It's okay. We don't have Douglas was evacuated from his home, so he's staying with some relatives. So he wrote me and said, "You'll need a new microphone man today." So Rada, you're hired. Bobby, what was your question? Okay, adults, yeah.
So I have a question about your sermon, if you don't mind talking.
Oh my God.
And also in the context of last week's Torah study, when we talked about forgiveness.
Yeah.
In your sermon, you talked about how
Yeah.
Judah's soul was transformed through his life experiences after he sold Joseph
Yeah.
into slavery.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
my question is, did Joseph really forgive Judah wholeheartedly? Did God?
Yeah.
Was Judah ever really forgiven for selling Joseph?
I don't know.
Did his father
What do
forgive
you
him?
think?
I don't think he was forgiven. I have an opinion about this because when Joseph loads them up with possessions for them to settle in wherever they settled, Goshen, I think,
Yes.
he gives Benjamin more possessions than
Yeah.
he gives the other brothers.
Benjamin's his only full brother.
That's correct, but if he had
Thank you.
totally, if he had totally forgiven them all, wouldn't he have given them all equal portions? Or do you think it's because Benjamin is his brother?
Yeah, I think it's Benjamin's his full brother.
So you think Judah was forgiven?
Well, look, I don't. It's a Jewish family, so Bobby says nobody forgives, right? Ever, not ever. You cut the turkey, you know. That's Barry Levinson's Midrash on the same story. Look, it's a very, very good question. Who is forgiven? I can't tell you who God forgives. Right. Judah does become the dominant brother. I mean, and later in history, the tribe of Judah becomes the dominant tribe. But even in the blessings, Judah, when Jacob gives his children a blessing on his deathbed, Judah and Joseph are the two principal blessings. Judah gets the blessing of leadership, and Joseph gets the blessing of prosperity. So those blessings, and Joseph actually gets a double portion, so he actually gets the firstborn's portion. But is he forgiven in the family? Is he forgiven? It's a very interesting question. You have a really interesting vignette at the end we can look at it at the end of the Torah. It's in chapter 50. Jacob dies, and the brothers say to themselves, now that Dad is dead, he's going to come after us. He'll get his revenge. Now, where did they get that idea from? Remember when Jacob stole the birthright from Esau? Esau said, as soon as my father's dead, I'll kill the little son of a bitch, right? Well, that's not what he said. I'll kill my brother, right? So the same notion that once the father's gone, there's nothing holding the brothers back from carrying out their revenge against each other. So when Jacob dies, the brothers say to themselves, Joseph's going to come for us now. Now, they've been living together for 20 years, but they're still worried. So there's still this residual guilt in the family over what they did. And they're projecting their guilt on their brother, right? And the story is that they come to Joseph with this made-up story. Before he died, Dad said, be sure not to hurt your brothers. And it's in chapter 50 of Genesis. Then they say this to Jacob, right? And to Joseph, sorry. And Joseph sees right through it. And he says, look, I'm not God. I didn't decide. You sent me down here for evil purposes. It turned out to be fine. It was to save life. He's made his peace with the circumstances. He's found a narrative in which he can contain what happened to him without holding the grudge. It's very clear that he's come to some peace with himself, and he's come to some peace with his brothers. But it hurts him at the end of the story that his brothers still feel this residual guilt, are still projecting that guilt onto him. There's still a lot of tension in the family. It's not finished. And the book of Genesis ends on that note, right? We'd like to think that, books end with a sort of, nice, neat bow, and everyone loves each other. It ain't so, because in real families, it's not, there's still this tension left behind. In real families, you don't simply forgive and forget. So it's clear that at the end of the story, there's still tension in there. Look, you don't try to kill your brother without leaving behind a residual. So is Judah forgiven at the end of the story? I think Joseph forgives him, yes. I think Joseph sees his life on a bigger narrative and understands that what his brothers did, as heinous, as evil as it was, actually was part of a divine plan. And he can make his peace with that. He can make his peace with that. I think that he's okay. Do the brothers ever really reconcile with themselves over what they did? I don't think so. I think they still hold it inside. Judah himself, is he forgiven? Now, metaphysically, I don't know. The story is a story of tshuva. Tshuva means to change. The man is changed. The ideology of the Torah and of the tradition is that a person who does true tshuva is forgiven. What is true tshuva? Asks Maimonides. If you find yourself in the same position, with the same set of circumstances, you make a different choice. Well, that's exactly what happened. When Joseph, playing the role of prime minister, takes Benjamin, his only true brother, his youngest brother, and says to the others, go home, you're free, I'll hold him as a slave. As I said in the sermon, he's replicating the same position he was in 21 years earlier when Judah said, let's sell him into slavery. But this time, Judah says, take me. Judah offers himself in his place of his younger brother. So there you would say that the exact same circumstances occurred, and the man made a different choice. The man made a life-affirming choice instead of a murderous choice. So I think that the tshuva is real. I think that he is forgiven. I think that's the purpose of the story, right? That plus, as I said in the talk, you know, if you want in a one-sentence line what Judaism is, it's his story. It's the cultivation of soul. And I try to figure out, you know, what's a one-sentence definition of Judaism. It only took me 30 minutes to tell you what a one-sentence is. It's the cultivation of soul. Yeah, Michael. Yeah. Well, hang on. Where's the mic? Where's come on, man. How long have you been doing this job, man? Come on. I know. Carol Merrill here. I'm going to make you caress a refrigerator in just a second.
Can we hear Rabbi Gelman's Midrash?
In a minute. Yeah, just a minute. In a minute. Mike, yeah, please.
Yeah, you mentioned Esau, and I think it's very important. It's kind of critical to sort of take a look at the story as part of that whole narrative.
Yeah.
Esau becomes very successful in life.
Yeah.
And then he faces his brother Jacob.
Right.
And it's he has reconciled his life.
Yes.
Rather than Jacob reconciling the life that he's led.
Yeah.
Now we get to Joseph, who has now had an enormous amount of time to reconcile what happened with him and his brothers.
Right.
And he's had that time. And I think the Torah really talks about, with both of these cases, that apocalyptic conversions don't really happen.
Right.
They happen over time.
Right.
You cannot resolve things that quickly or that rapidly. As you said, at the end, they're concerned about, he's going to kill us.
Right.
He's going to kill us.
Yeah.
And I think that demonstrates to the rest of us that don't expect to have an immediate conversion. It takes time. You can forgive, but very often you can't forget.
Right.
Rabbi Schulweis once said that about the Holocaust.
Yeah.
And I thought that was very important.
Right.
You can forgive but not forget. Forgetting means you're just washing away everything that's negative, whereas you must think about those things as something you will not replicate in the future.
Right. Yeah, it's a really interesting question. So if you take Maimonides' model of tshuva seriously, you know, what does it take to know that the next time I meet that circumstance, I'm going to choose differently? It takes a certain consciousness to see where I am and see what's asked of me and remember what happened last time. It's a very sophisticated model of what it means to be a changed human being, because it means you never let go of what you did or what was done, but you learned something from it. You make a very conscious choice to choose otherwise. Billy, did you want to add something? Wait, grab the mic. We have friends waiting at home. I want to hear what you have to say.
Well, apropos of Michael's remarks at the end of the story, you could say that Joseph forgave, but he never forgot, because he left his brothers in Goshen when he introduced Manasseh and Ephraim to Jacob. It was as if he didn't know them. So he had it seemed like there could have been a separation, so he never interacted with his brothers after they were in Goshen.
That's a good question. How close was the family? You know, did they gather for Thanksgiving, you know? And because you have this as Bill said, you have this very strange scene at the end of the story when Father Jacob is dying. Joseph brings his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, for a blessing. And Jacob says, Mi Eila. Who are these kids? And that can mean many different things. It could mean that he mamish didn't recognize his grandchildren. Now, it could mean he lost his mind, didn't recognize his grandchildren. It could mean that he didn't know who they were because he had no contact with them. It could mean that they were Egyptian. Remember, their father is the prince of Egypt, and their mother is an Egyptian priestess. So chances are, you know, they're not wearing a mezuzah. I mean, chances are they look very Egyptian and act very Egyptian, and the old Jewish grandfather, mamish, doesn't recognize his assimilated grandchildren, right? I mean, so there's a lot there that you could see. what's going on. And we could draw all kinds of interesting scenarios. Look, what I did in the talk was I took the structure of the story and I did what great midrashists do. I tried to find, what's the deeper backstory. But it's an imaginative reconstruction. You can construct the story in different ways. And that particular episode, which we'll get to in about 12 weeks, right? Vayechi, it's 12 weeks. Really interesting episode. I mean, what does it mean when the grandfather says, who are these kids? What does it mean for a grandfather to look at his grandchildren and not recognize them? What does that mean? Or is it a deeper question? All right, I know what they look like. What are they like inside? I mean, that's a deeper question, right? Who are they? What kind of lives do they live? Who are they? What's their heart like? I mean, that's and the Midrash plays on that theme as well. Farzan, please. Wait, hang on, wait. Give it to Farzan and then... What? Close the door. Thank you.
Brian, I just have 6 words. That's it. No, but forgetting is a matter of brain. Forgiving is a matter of soul.
Forgetting is a matter of brain, of mind. Forgiving is a matter of soul. That's a nice. That's a nice sermon. That's next word. Next year you're going to hear that as a sermon. That's a very nice thing. All right. Other comments, questions about the stuff we heard on Yontif? I mean, there's some. Yeah. Rav, did you bring a midrash today? Oh, Rabbi, because my dad said.
I was just reporting a midrash.
Yeah. Okay. Please. Yeah.
So the old midrash about why 2 candles.
Oh, we'll come back to the candle thing.
Which is what we were talking about.
You have to have a.
We were talking about that.
I appreciate that.
I understand. Is very bad, and it shows you how midrash is not always a way of lifting up Jewish values. Sometimes it's a way of destroying them. The midrash, it's Ishmael who says that why we light too, and why does a woman light? Because the woman, Eve, was responsible for reducing the light of the world because of her eating from the fruit. And so she has to add another candle to bring back the light of the world that all women are responsible for reducing. Welcome to Judaism, guys. Now there's a Judaism that's fuzzy and warm and wonderful, and that's what you need Rabbi Feinstein for. He'll tell you about all the wonderful and fuzzy warm. But I'm retired and I know everything. So I actually can tell you the truth.
He's not responsible to a board of directors
plus
anymore.
This forgetting and forgiving. Please. We had the biggest discussion last week with Mark here, and it was really important. And I was thinking, sitting in your wonderful services and at the Mizrahi Menu, which I'm so grateful that Solar invited me to preach at. And so I'm thinking, what is it we're asking here? What is every one of these million prayers? It's like a million, right? What is every one of them about? Every one of them is Lamancha. Lamancha, the cantor singing, Lamancha. Ein banu ma'asim.
Right.
Our entire script for Yontif is, God, grant us unconditional forgiveness.
Right.
We don't deserve it. We have no deeds. For your sake, grant us unconditional forgiveness. And God asks us, well, why don't you grant unconditional forgiveness to others? Well, not so fast. Not so fast, God, because it's forgetting and forgiving. It's different. No. Let it go. Let it go.
Okay.
And I will close with my favorite poet who died in January, American poet Mary Oliver.
Yeah.
And Mary Oliver in Backwoods Water has a coda at the end of her poem. To live in the world, you must be able to do 3 things. To love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones as if your life depended upon it. And when it is time to die, to let it go. And that is the truth of this.
Okay.
When you are in negative thinking and anger and revenge and resentment, in order to live in this world and be mortal, you must let it go.
Okay. Oh, good. Mary Oliver, great American poet. Right. I mean, Adele, it occurs to me that
It's in her collection.
Judah never apologizes to Joseph. Right? There's never a moment where he stands in front of his brother and says, you know, what I did was... But they do have a reconciliation because he acts differently in the world, and Joseph lets it go.
Internally, Judah does, but I don't know. I was curious about the brothers.
No, I think it's...
Very much, I think you...
No, I think it's a really good question, and it's apropos of what the rabbi just said. At what point do at what point do you let it go?
Right.
At what point do you simply let it go because it's either killing you or because it's the right thing to do to let it go? Pop.
There was an SS major who was dying in a hospital.
That's a famous story called the Sunflower.
And he sent for a rabbi to
Right.
forgive him.
Right.
And the rabbi said to him, I can't forgive you. The people you hurt have to forgive you.
Right. So the story is that the guy, it's a book by Simon Wiesenthal, right? Called The Sunflower. And it was actually put out in 2 editions, an earlier edition about 25, 30 years ago, and then a later edition more recently. And that was the question. A Nazi is dying in a hospital, and a Nazi says, before I die, I want to be forgiven by the Jews that I tortured. And they call for somebody to come, and he asks this Jewish fellow for forgiveness. And the question is, what should the Jewish fellow say to him? And then they have a dozen thinkers, scholars, poets, writers, each answer the question. Okay? In each edition, it's different people. So the answer that Abraham Joshua Heschel gave was that answer, was that you can't ask me for forgiveness. You have to ask the people that you actually, you have to stand before the people you actually hurt and ask them forgiveness, right? And yes, that's the problem. You see? Yeah, no, that becomes the issue. And now, Baruch atah Hashem, Elokeinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu, litakein et mezug avir u'mayim. All right, today, what I'd like to do today, thank you for those questions. And if there's any other things that you heard over the holidays that you'd like to discuss, I'm delighted to discuss it. But I thought today we would take on the next Jewish holiday, which is Sukkot, which begins tomorrow night. If you happen to have a Chumash, I want to take a look at 2 sections of the Chumash and then proceed to some of the rabbinic material, which you'll find on that page. Here's the question that you're asking yourself, but none of you has the courage to ask. What? Another holiday? Are you crazy? All right, let's try that all together. There you go. Exactly. This is what rabbis say to themselves. Like whose dumb scheduling error was this? I mean, you just had the 2 most intensive holidays of the year. Why on earth would you want another one, especially 8 days long with construction? Why not take this holiday and put it in the summer, right? In California, this is actually a very benign holiday. It's going to be 74 degrees. It's going to be clear. It'll be 68 at night. It'll be a machaya. If you live in Boston, apparently there's this big tropical storm moving up the Atlantic. They're supposed to get like 12 inches of snow. Denver went down 64 degrees in one day. That makes, you got to be tough to do. I do sukkahs, right? I told you when I was at the Jewish Theological Seminary, they build this big sukkah in the courtyard, and they invite all these dignitaries. And in my senior year of rabbinical school, I got invited to this dinner to give a little drasha. And I'm sitting next to Robert Abrams, who's the Attorney General of the state of New York, and we're having our soup, and it's pouring rain. And he looks down and says, "This is a never-ending soup bowl," Rabbi, is that the tradition? It was like, but in California, it's a machai. Why do you have a holiday here? What is this holiday for? Why is it here? And how does it relate to the holidays we've just had? What does it say about the holidays we've just had? Let's take a look inside, and then we'll talk about this together. So the first page is 727, page 727. If you don't have the page, I'll read it to you. It's Leviticus It's Leviticus 23. It's Leviticus 23:30. I'm sorry, 7:28. Leviticus 23:39, 7:29. Okay, Mark 7:29, last paragraph. Mark, in Hebrew it's ach, which means yo. On the 15th day of the 7th month. Remember that in the Bible, the calendar begins in Nisan. So this is the 7th month, not the 1st month. Okay? It's only when we went to Babylon that we had to learn how to date our checks according to the Babylonian calendar. Otherwise, they wouldn't have understood what you wrote. So this became, Tishrei became the 1st month. But in the Jewish, in the Palestinian calendar, the Israelite calendar, this is the 7th month. The 15th day of the 7th month, when you've gathered the yield of your land, you shall observe the festival of the Lord to last 7 days. We add an 8th day because of Galut, because we're outside of Eretz Yisrael. A complete rest on the 1st day, a complete rest on the 8th day. On the 1st day, you will take the product pre-Eitz Hadar. Pre means fruit. Eitz means tree. Hadar means really nice. The fruit of a really nice tree, or the really nice fruit of a tree, of the tree. Pre-Eitz Hadar. Or Hadar, no one knows what Hadar means. Hadar means, the word Hadar means nice, like Hidur Mitzvah. So does it mean the fruit of a really nice tree? I didn't take it a peach, you know. Or does it mean the fruit of the Hadar tree, which is how our translator does it, right? Branches of palm, boughs of leafy trees, willows at a brook, and you will rejoice before the Lord your God 7 days. I want you to take, you've gathered in your harvest, I want you to take some of the nicest stuff at a harvest, and I want you to use that as part of your celebration. Anyone see the word etrog here? Me neither. Anyone see a price tag of $85, $90, $100? Me neither. You will observe it as a festival of the Lord 7 days. You'll observe it in the 7th month as a law for all time, throughout ages. You will live in booths. Besukot teishvu. You will live in a sukkah, in a booth. All citizens of Israel will live in booths. Does it say eat in booths? No. It says, so what are you supposed to do? Move out of your house into your sukkah for a week. That's kind of cool if you're 15 years old and you don't have back problems, right? Right? Now why are you going to live in a booth for 7 days? Listen carefully. It's interesting that it just, because for the other holidays, it just tells you do it. Here, they know you're asking the question, huh? So they give you, the next word in Hebrew is lima'an. For what purpose? Why? What for? Lima'an. It tells you the reason. The only reason a law ever tells you a reason is because it knows you're asking, why am I having to do this, right?
And it isn't the reason.
Well, according to Gelman. According to God, it's the reason. Well, that we'll find out in a minute. Okay. So here. Wait. We'll get to that in a minute. Why? In order that, that's lima'an, in order that future generations may know, dorotechem, yedu dorotechem, future generations may know that I made the Israelites live in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt, I, the Lord, your God. So Moses told everybody what to do. All right, so what are you supposed to do here? Number 1, don't work. 7 days. Number 2, first and last day. Number 2, gather 4 different kinds of vegetation and celebrate. Right? Usamachtem lifnei Adonai. Have a joyful time before God with 4 different kinds of vegetables. Okay? Number 3, live in a booth. Right? Why? So that your kids and your kids' kids will know that when you came out of Egypt, this is how you lived. So what are we trying to do here? We're trying to replicate the experience of the Exodus. You're going to relive the Exodus every year. For 1 week of the year, you're going to go back to the desert. You're going to go back to the wilderness. You're going to go back to that condition. Now, does it tell you how to build the booth? No. That's coming. but it doesn't, it just says go live in some kind of, because I want you to relive the experience of the Exodus. I want you to reappropriate that as experience, as a personal experience. Reappropriate the memory as a personal experience. Now, by the way, this is the model for our three festivals. For Pesach, Sukkot, and Shavuot, we relive an experience of history. On Pesach, you're going to relive the last night of Egypt. You're going to eat what they ate. You're going to dress like they dressed. You're going to feel like you're leaving Egypt tonight. You're going to relive it. It's not enough simply to tell it. You're going to re-experience it. On Shavuot, you're going to stay up all night receiving Torah and eating blintzes, just like Moses did, right? You're going to relive the experience, okay? Now, contrast this just for a moment, just so that we get this clear. What experience are you reliving on Yom Kippur? That's right, none. Yom Kippur is not historical. It's an ahistorical holiday. You're not reliving an historical moment on Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is not about your ancestors and what they did and what they learned. Yom Kippur is about you. It's not about your history. It's not about your background. It's about you and your soul, your morality, your connection to God, your life. There's no history in Yom Kippur. It's completely in the present tense. Okay? Rosh Hashanah has a hint. Rosh Hashanah is, in the liturgy, says Hayom Harat Olam. Today's the birthday of the world. So in a little way, you're rehearsing the birth of the world on Rosh Hashanah. You're also rehearsing the birth of the covenant on Rosh Hashanah. It's a little bit of history in Rosh Hashanah. Sukkot, Pesach, and Shavuot are deeply historical holidays. Deeply historical. The other contrast is, on Sukkot, listen to what you get to do. I want you to be joyful with 4 different kinds of vegetations. I want you to move out of your house and live in a booth outside. I want you to be joyful. It's a joyful holiday, and it's very sensuous. It's all about the senses, right? Pesach, sit at a meal and eat matzah and maror and charoset and brisket and potatoes, right? There's a sensual, there's a sense, there's a body involved in this, right? Shavuot, stay up all night learning Torah, eat milchiks. There's a body involved. Yom Kippur, no body. You have no body on Yom Kippur. You're a disembodied spirit on Yom Kippur. So you're going back to the body now, back to the sensual life, back to history. It's a huge contrast. And they're only 4 days apart. Only 4 days apart. All right, so far so good, right? Let's turn the page now. Turn, please, if you would, to page, it's Deuteronomy 16, verse 13, page 1084. Page 1084. Everybody good so far?
You're going to deal with we didn't live in booths.
I promise you, I'm going to deal with we didn't live in booths. You don't have to worry. I know. 1084, verse 13, 16:13. After the ingathering from your threshing floor and your vat, you will hold the Feast of Booths for 7 days. So wait a minute. What just happened that we didn't... You don't do this in Southern California because Gelson's is here. God gave us Gelson's. But if God had not given us Gelson's, what would we have been doing this last 3-4 weeks? Harvesting. Inventing Gelson's. Harvesting. You've had a harvest. Now you're a farmer. You've been working all summer growing crops, right? You go out now, and so this assumes that Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur doesn't exist, because otherwise, how would you do this, right? Right? So you've been out harvesting crops, okay? The crops are in, the barn is full, the silo is full, the vats are full. Now what are you going to do? Now you're going to celebrate. Now you're going to celebrate. Having filled up your barn, now you're going to celebrate. This is the seam line between the dry season and the wet season. The dry season, the summer, the growing summer is finished now. We now bring in the harvest. We bring in the harvest. And now that the harvest is in and you know you have enough for the winter, now you're going to celebrate. Okay? You shall hold the Feast of Booths for 7 days. You shall rejoice in your festival. Now, so this is something, it's said before, it's v'samachtem, you'll have joy with the 4 different kinds of vegetables. But here, this is a more specific, v'samachta bechagecha. It is a positive imperative to celebrate. You're supposed to celebrate. Who? You, your son, your daughter, your male and female slaves, the Levite, the stranger, the fatherless, the widow in your community. Who do you invite to your table to celebrate? Everybody. The whole community comes to the table. Even the stranger, even the homeless, even the people who are not part of your household. This is not a private celebration. This becomes the public celebration. Where did they get that idea from? This is what the king did. In royal estates, there'd be a week during the year. In Christian Europe, it was Christmas week, when the whole town would be invited into the palace to eat. Everyone ate at the king's table. You get to do the same thing. You get to be a king for a week. Everyone comes and eats at your table. You shall hold a festival for the Lord your God 7 days. Where should you hold it? Now listen carefully. I thought you were going to do it at home. That's what it seemed like. But now he's going to add a new idea. Where? In a place that the Lord will choose. Not at home, but in God's place. For the Lord your God will bless all your crops and all your undertakings, and you'll have nothing but joy. So you're supposed to go to that place and enjoy it there. That's a whole different thing. All right, so now what do we got? We have a holiday that comes after the ingathering, after the harvest festival, right? We have a holiday that tells you you're supposed to be joyful. We have a holiday that says you're supposed to include the whole community in the joy, right? You have a holiday that says you're supposed to celebrate with these 4 kinds of vegetables. And you have a holiday that says you're supposed to move out of your house and into the booth. Here you don't get the historical thing that you got in Leviticus. In Leviticus it was, don't forget to, this is in order not to forget how you lived when you were in the desert. Yes, please.
In the same Leviticus, previous page 733, it speaks of Sukkot twice.
Right.
First, if you go back.
What page, 733?
Hold on.
What page are you on?
Okay, go to page, hold on, here. Okay. So go to page 724. First it talks about Shabbat and then Passover. It doesn't say Leman what? It just say, Chag HaMatzot.
Right.
It doesn't say because I took you out of Egypt.
Right.
Then talks about Shavuot. And then goes to, whatever, and then ends with Sukkot. And it doesn't say because.
Right.
And then in a page later, it tells because I took you out of Egypt.
Right. So if you look at that, so you're on page 7. Where did you find Sukkot on the first time?
726.
Right. So read it.
No, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Sorry.
Don't be sorry. It's fine.
Okay.
23:8.
23:8.
Okay. No, that's Pesach. You'll eat of unleavened bread for 7 days. On the first day you'll celebrate. 7 days you'll make gifts to the Lord.
Okay.
Then he says, say to them, when you enter the land I'm giving you, bring the first sheaf of the harvest. That's the first fruits. Okay? Then count 50 days. That's Omer.
Okay, go to top of page 729.
Okay, 729, yeah.
ב-15 יום לחודש השביעי.
Right.
Talks about Sukkot.
Yeah,
It says 7 days they are holy. That's it.
yeah.
And then,
On the first day will be a sacred occasion. Do no work. 7 days bring gifts to the Lord. You're going to offer special sacrifices on those days.
right.
That's the public worship.
And then,
That's the public worship. There's a public worship and a private worship. The public worship is you're going to offer special sacrifices on those days, right? The private worship is what we read, which is, okay, that's what's going on at the shrine. Here's what I want you to do at home.
but how come it doesn't talk about the private worship for the other holidays?
I don't know. What do you think? Right? It does, actually. It tells you Pesach, you're supposed to eat leavened bread. No, earlier, where you read it. Where you read it, right? Okay? It says Pesach, on the first day of the 14th month at twilight, there'll be Passover of the Lord. On the 15th day, you'll eat unleavened bread. On the first day, you'll have a sacred occasion. So the unleavened bread is what it says you're supposed to do. That's home. Yes, right, exactly. And that's why, because here's why. What does Pesach represent? The Exodus, right? What does Shavuos represent? Well, we call it the giving of the Torah at Sinai. They don't have it that way. They have it just 50 days later, you have the Feast of the First Fruits, okay? These two holidays have very clear reasons for doing them. What is this holiday in the fall all about, right? You have an event, Pesach, an Exodus. I have it, it's the 4th of July. It's Thanksgiving. Right? I have an event. I commemorate that event, right? Shavuos is the first fruits. We turned it into the first fruits of our revelation of Torah. It's an event. What event does Sukkot represent? There's no event. It's the harvest, yes, but there's no historical event. It's the time in the desert. The time in the desert is not an event. It's a process. You see? So you could ask the question, well, if there's an event for Pesach, an event for Shavuos, what's the event for Sukkot? The harvest is clearly what it is. But then they add this other thing. So now I've got to ask you a hard question. What does harvest have to do with being in the desert? No, use your imagination. That's a great question. So thank you for asking that question, right? Pesach, I'm liberated from Egypt, and it's my springtime. I can see where the two come together, because springtime is a liberation. It's a liberation from the cold of winter. It's the birth of new life in the world. It's the birth of my freedom. That makes a lot of sense. Okay? Shavuot is the gift of first fruits. It's the gift of Torah. That's a great connection. What does harvest have to do with the desert? So I want you to, that's a great question. Now I want you to hold that question in mind, because we're going to get to the part that Rabbi Gelman has been dying for me to teach you. But first, Ron has a question, and it's his birthday, so he gets a question.
It includes the dirty, smelling immigrants who are like our ancestors.
Are you making a political statement?
What was the question?
It says everybody comes to your table on Sukkot. Everybody, including the stranger who is in your gates. Right? Everyone comes to your table. It doesn't distinguish between native-born and aliens, immigrants and citizens. It doesn't distinguish between upper and lower class. It doesn't distinguish between your family and the outside. Everyone comes to your table on Sukkot. That's a very interesting, powerful statement. Yes, Bobby.
Also, I think we need something more positive after Yom Kippur.
We're going to get to that too. So the first question I want to ask you is, Rabbi Gelman's question is, did we really live in booths?
Of course not.
Wait, hang on a second. I know you were there, but I want to make sure.
I was very young, though.
I know. Second question is the question that you asked, which is, if the holidays all have a natural reason, Pesach is springtime, Shavuos is the early harvest, the first fruits, Sukkot is the late harvest, and they all have a historical meaning. Pesach is Exodus, Shavuos is Torah, Sukkot is the desert. The Pesach, the two meanings, natural and historical, go together nicely. Liberation that's natural, liberation that's historical. That's good. Shavuos, gifts that are natural, gifts that are spiritual. Goes together nicely. What the heck does harvest have to do with desert? That's a great question. That's a second question. Okay? Third question. What was your question?
Well, we needed something more uplifting.
Third question. Why on earth would you put another holiday 4 days after Yom Kippur when the rabbi is still exhausted and has run out of things to say and has no more sermons to give, and the community's just had this intense experience of prayer and tshuva? Why have another holiday? Why have another holiday? Okay, those are the three questions in front of us. Everybody understand the question? There's a fourth question, David. I'm running out of room for my questions. I'm trying to remember all of them. Go ahead.
The fact of the matter is that the Torah, as we are reading it,
Yeah.
was written probably most likely after the Israelites went and had a country and experienced a semi-civilized community and country,
Yeah.
where there was harvesting, where there was weekends and a lot of other things that as we know right now. Whereas in the desert, as it was said, was 3,500 and somewhat years ago,
Yeah.
none of those existed.
Okay.
So we are really experiencing and explaining things and events that happened after the creation of or the establishment of the state of Israel at that time.
Yeah, right. Exactly right. You're in a very different position than your ancestors were. That might be a hint to the answer of why the Torah wants you to go outside and live in a booth for a week. It's a very strange thing to tell people to do. All right, first of all, see, everybody got the sheet? Sukkot 11b. So there's a tractate of the Talmud called Sukkah. Guess what it's about? If anybody has a 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, or 12-year-old at home, learn the first chapter, the first 3 chapters of Mishnah Sukkot. It's hysterically funny. It's all the Sukkot you can and can't build, right? It sounds just like a Dr. Seuss poem, right? You can build it on a hill, you can build it if you will, you can build it in a valley, you can build it with, I mean, it's so funny. It talks about how high a sukkah can be, how low a sukkah can be, how wide. There's a discussion in the Talmud that goes after this. What can you use an elephant for one wall of your sukkah? I taught this to my son when he was about 11 years old. And the kid was rolling on the floor with laughter. So I said, okay, why are they asking this question? He says, well, it's very simple. What if the elephant gets up and walks away? Do you have a kosher sukkah? You know, how do you keep an elephant from walking away? I mean, it sounds like a joke, you know. And then what happens if the elephant dies? Is the sukkah still kosher? And one rabbi says, yeah, because an elephant's carcass is big enough to be a wall of the sukkah. And then somebody says, you know what an elephant smells like after 8 days of a holiday? I mean, this is the kind of mishigas that your rabbis spend their time worrying about. So you can build an elephant on the back of a camel. You can build a sukkah on the back of a camel. You can build a sukkah on a ship. You can. But you can't build a sukkah on top of a sukkah. I mean, it goes like this. But here's the interesting question, and this is what Rabbi Gelman is getting at. There's a machloket there. It happens to be about a technical matter, about whether schach, the leaves on the top of the sukkah, can accept ritual purity. And they come to this conversation. This is the interesting part. It has been taught, I made the children of Israel dwell in booths. Rabbi Eliezer, who we met a couple of weeks ago, he's the guy with the miracles, remember? Rabbi Eliezer said, these were the clouds of glory. And Rabbi Akiva said, no, they were really Sukkot. All right, so it is actually a very sophisticated discussion going on here. Okay? First of all, did we really live in booths? If you're crossing the Sinai desert, what are you likely to be sleeping in at night? A tent, right? Did the rabbis know that? Sure, they knew Bedouins. I mean, they knew nomads. I mean, they knew wanderers. They know. So where did we get this idea of booths, right? So besides, except for that one mitzvah, nowhere else in the Torah does it say we built, I mean, when they camped in such and such a place, they built booths? What would they build booths out of? They're in the desert. There's nothing that grows there, right? So Rabbi Eliezer says, no, that's not what it's about. When it says, I made them dwell in booths, Hoshavti beSukkot, it means I covered them with a cloud of glory. That is in the Torah, right? That at night there was a cloud that covered Bnei Israel. So that when we went through the desert, God covered us with a cloud. What is he telling us? What is he telling us? Say what? Say it again. We were protected. By whom? By God. Are we still protected? No. Think for a minute. So for Rabbi Eliezer, the clouds of God's glory protected us in the desert. When you go out of your house, outside, and you live in a booth, you're leaving the security of this. You're leaving the security of structures. There's no ceiling over your head. There's no air conditioning. There's no firm structures. You're living in a temporary, rickety. I mean, the tradition is that the sukkah has to be rickety. It has to be somewhat shaky. It has to be very temporary. But that represents for Rabbi Eliezer what? That represents the fact that even when you don't have physical structures over your head, that's never what protects you. What protects you is God's grace. So for Rabbi Eliezer, the whole holiday is about what? Is to remember that you're not protected by the structures in which you live. These structures are temporary. These structures crumble. These structures can't be relied on. The only thing that you can rely on in your life is that God's going to protect you. This is a statement of Rabbi Eliezer's faith, the very deep, faithful man. And what he's trying to get us to remember is that we can't build structures that can protect us. Now this brings us right back to your Yom Kippur thought, because that's exactly what Yom Kippur said too, right? Yom Kippur said, the things in life that matter most, you can't control. Life and death, health and sickness, fortune and misfortune. You can work very hard all your life and never make a fortune, and then there are these guys that stumble over it in the street, right? They win a lottery, they start a crazy company, and there's contingency in the world. So much of it that you can't depend on. That's not what life is about. You have to understand that you can't control those things. They're beyond your control, and living outside of that control. The only grace is the grace of God's protection. That's Rabbi Eliezer's position. So when he looks up at his sukkah, what does he see? He sees God's protection over him. That's what he sees. Rabbi Akiva disagrees. Rabbi Akiva says, no, they really lived in Sukkot. They really lived in booths. Why does he say that? Why does he say that? Yeah, what's his point?
The point, I think, it goes back to the fact that Pesach, Sukkot, and Shavuot
Yeah.
are three agricultural holidays
Right.
to begin with.
Yes.
And even if you look at early America, when we had a major agricultural society, when they harvested in the fields, they built temporary cabins, the farmers.
Yeah.
Built temporary cabins.
Yeah.
Or had permanent small log cabins in the field before we had tractors and trucks and all the wheels to get out there.
Right.
So they wouldn't have to travel from where their farmhouse was into the fields.
Right.
So they lived in those places while they did the harvest.
Right.
Now, the question is, you take that and then you transform that idea into a metaphysical notion.
Right.
And I think that's what's happened here.
Yes.
We have this idea of, we have a practical thing, and now what do we do with this?
Yes.
We make it into something that...
I think that's very true. I mean, when you read that Deuteronomy source, it's very clear that what you've spent the last weeks harvesting your crops, then you're told, stay out in the field for another week. Stay out in the field for another week, living in the booth, right? That's exactly right. So what is the holiday? If the holiday for Rabbi Eliezer is a celebration of God's continued grace, is God's protection, what is the holiday for Rabbi Akiva? When he looks up and sees his sukkah, what does he see? He doesn't see clouds of glory. What does he see? Schach, leaves. What does he see? History. Yeah, part of it I think is exact history. I think that's true. It is a remembrance and a re-experiencing, a rehearsal, a reiteration of what we went through in the desert. I think he sees vulnerability. I think that for Rabbi Akiva, what we're told is leave the structures of your home and go outside and understand that you are living in all of life is temporary. All of life is a sukkah. All of life is vulnerable. And you're supposed to experience that and take that in. And take that in for a moment. And I think part of the reason, and that goes to the kinds of questions we asked before, because once you understand that vulnerability, once you understand that you're not protected by these structures, right, then you begin to look at your life in a very, very different sense. It's a very, very different feeling. So for Rabbi Eliezer, they're actually opposite ideas. For Rabbi Eliezer, this is a holiday celebrating God's protection and grace. And for Rabbi Akiva, it's something much more, I think in some ways, much more sophisticated, much more paradoxical. Can you find joy despite the vulnerability? Because it's v'samachtem, you have to find joy. Can you find joy in and around the vulnerability of being a human being? That's what Rabbi Akiva wants us to understand. That within the vulnerability, you can find moments of great power and great joy. In fact, through the vulnerability, you come to understand the joy. Now take a look at the way that these ideas are now played out. Rashi takes up Rabbi Eliezer's idea. When Rashi is Rabbi Shlomo ben Yitzchak, who is the great 11th century French commentator. He says, on his comment on, for in Sukkot I made you dwell, he just puts be'ananei kavod, in the clouds of glory. He takes Rabbi Eliezer's side of the argument. His grandson was Rashbam. Okay? Rashi's daughter married Moshe, and Rabbi Shimon ben Moshe, Rashbam, is Rashi's grandson. Rashi's grandson writes a commentary on Rashi. This must have been one hell of a Pesach table. And almost everything that Rashi says, Rashbam says, nah. Grandpa, old man, Zayda, what do you know? It's really the two of them, but with a lot of love, So he says, the word Sukkot is to be understood literally. So whose side does he take? He takes Akiva's side. Why? And this is your answer, what you said a moment ago. The meaning of the verse then would be, construct for yourselves the festival of huts after you gather in your grain and great harvest. You are to do this at the time you gather produce of the earth, and your houses are filled with all the good things the earth produces, such as grain, grape, wine, and oil. This is to be done in order that you will remember when you were in the desert 40 years and neither owned land nor found yourselves in a cultivated part of the earth. Remembering all this, you will have ample reason to be grateful to the one who has provided you with all your present wealth and comfort. You will not fall into the trap of thinking all this success was due to your own efforts. What's the worry here? We actually have this in a verse in Deuteronomy. I think it's in chapter 8. Moses says to the people, here's what I'm worried about. You're going to move into the land. You're going to settle the land. You're going to start farming. You're going to build homes. And you're going to say, whew, look what I did. Look what I did. I created all of this. All of this is mine. And then you'll go one step further, which is something I spoke about in that long, long, long sermon, which is you'll say, I am the self-created man. And you'll forget that nothing in life came to you only by your own efforts. It came to you as a gift. Everything is a gift. And the difference between those two attitudes of it's all mine and it came to me as a gift is the difference here. So Rashbam says, no, we did live in booths, and I want you to go back and live in those booths because I want you to remember that everything you have in your life is a gift. And the irony is, so he says, here's the irony. Do the harvest. Take all the stuff out of the field, put it in the barn, stock the fridge, fill the kitchen, fill the pantry, and then move out of the house. So everything is in the house. Like all the wealth you own is in this house, and you're living out here in a schmucky little booth. Right? Remember that famous joke about the guy who builds the sukkah in his backyard, and his neighbors object because he didn't have a permit? They go to court, and the judge looks down and says, what'd you do? He says, I built a sukkah. He says, okay, you're hereby ordered to take down that sukkah. You have 8 days to comply. But the idea that I own a mansion, I'm living in a schmucky little booth. Why? Because once a year I have to remember that I don't own anything. It's all a gift. It's all by the grace of God. And it comes with strings attached. As Ron said, you have to open the table. Hi, Rabbi. I open, it's all given, that's the Rashbam. So for Rashi gives Rabbi Eliezer that Sukkot is about God's protection. It's a celebration of God's protection. For Rashbam, for his grandson, it's the opposite. It's this question of how do I find joy in vulnerability? How do I find gratitude when I recognize that the structures of my life are not that firm? They're actually kind of contingent. It's even in the structure of the sukkah itself. So here's the Shulchan Aruch, which is the code of Jewish law. The word for the stuff at the top of a sukkah is schach. If that doesn't clear your throat, nothing will. Okay? Try getting a non-Jewish person to say that word. It's the funniest thing. Schach, right? Right? So here's the halacha. How much schach can you put on the thing, on the top? You have to allow the stars to be seen. Initially, the schach must be light, thin and light, enough for large stars to be visible through the schach at night. Now, what are they saying? So that when you sleep in the sukkah, you're supposed to sleep in the sukkah, and you look up, what do you see? You see the stars. Why? Yeah, but how do you feel when you see stars above you? That's it. That's exactly right. Right? B'di'evet. However, people get enthusiastic. If you've already built it as thick as a roof of a house, to the point that no rays of the sun penetrate, okay, the sukkah is valid so long as rain is able to penetrate through the schach. So when you're building the sukkah, build it so you can see the stars. But if you get too enthusiastic and you throw all the schach on it and it becomes like a roof, as long as rain can still get in. Now think about that. So what do you need? I want you to live in a booth where you feel the rain on your head and the wind on your face and the sun on your back and the stars at night, because that is your human condition. That's your human condition. So the Shulchan Aruch follows who? Rashi or Rashbam? Come on, give me a thumb. The Shulchan Aruch follows Rashi. These are the clouds of glory, or Rashbam. This is supposed to be a real sukkah that's really rickety. The Rashbam. The Rashbam wins. The Rashbam wins. Okay. Now there's a beautiful little gematria that's given by the Sfas Emes, where he says lulav. The gematria of lulav is the same as chayim, as life. So when the Torah says take the lulav, take the Pri Etz Hadar, it means take life. Okay? Take life. But what I really want you to see is, we'll do Alan later. We'll do Alan last, because he's good. Turn the page over. Now we're going to get a different one. Let's do Kohelet. Kohelet, we're going to read on Sukkot. Kohelet's the book of Ecclesiastes. Okay? Kohelet's Ecclesiastes. And Ecclesiastes goes, the whole book of Ecclesiastes says there's no point to life. It starts out with these wonderful words, Hevel Hevelim, Hakol Hevel. The word Hevel is translated in your Bible as vanity. Sometimes it's translated as futility. But you know what the word Hevel means, because you live in Southern California. Hevel is the weather report you get most days in Southern California. Early morning, low clouds and fog burning off by noon. That's literally what the word Hevel means. So when he says everything in life is Hevel, everything in life has no more substance, no more lasting effect than early morning clouds, what is he saying? Nothing lasts. Nothing is firm. Nothing is sturdy. And this is the book that we read on Sukkot. And yet, when you get to the end of the book, what does he say? Does he say, therefore life is worthless, go commit suicide? No. He says two things. You know one of them, because he copied it from the birds. To everything turn, 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 there is a season, and a time for every purpose under heaven. That's the poetic version of what he says. He says life has a rhythm. It has its wonderful moments, and it has its sad moments. It has its moments of plenty and its moments of want. Experience all of them. Don't let any of them pass without taking them in. And then he gives you the prose version of the same basic wisdom. It's a sort of stoic wisdom, which is a wisdom, a resigned kind of wisdom, where he says, look, you're not going to find anything in life that purely lasts. But that doesn't mean there isn't in life what there is worth to live for. Go eat your bread in gladness and drink your wine in joy. This sound familiar? Yeah. This is the Torah's V'samachta, enjoy. For your action was long ago proved by God. Now, by the way, what he's trying to say as well is that denying yourself is not what God wants. Life has enough pain in it. Don't add to it. I know it's hard for Jews to hear, right? Because the national Jewish food is Slim Fast, you know? I mean, denying ourselves and being ascetic, you know? But the idea here is that, you know, life has enough pain. Why add to it? Go enjoy your life. Enjoy your life. Let your clothes be freshly washed, your head never lack ointment. Enjoy happiness with a woman or a man you love all the fleeting days of your life that have been granted you under the sun, all your fleeting days. And here's his answer. For that alone is what you get out of life. It's the moments of joy that you share with the people around you. That's what you get out of life. And out of the means you acquire under the sun. Whatever it is in your power to do, do with all your might. For there's no action, no reasoning, no learning, no wisdom in Sheol, which is death, where you're going. So what is Kohelet's answer at the end of his book? It's in many ways a reflection of Rabbi Akiva's wisdom, or the other way around, of course, right? Rabbi Akiva says, look, I know that everything in my life is empty, and that's why that is unsturdy, is unsubstantial. And that's why the moments of simcha, that's why the mitzvah is v'samachta. It's the paradox between vulnerability and joy. And Kohelet says, so enjoy it. So enjoy the days that you get. Enjoy the sweetness of life. Enjoy what you're given, but really enjoy it. Right? Don't be one of these people who goes to a fancy restaurant and says, oh, I shouldn't have that. You know those people? Right? I mean, you know, like I shouldn't, or you eat something and then you say, I shouldn't have had that. If you're going to eat a hot fudge sundae, eat the damn hot fudge sundae. Don't tell me while you're eating the hot fudge sundae why you shouldn't be eating the hot fudge sundae. Only Jews do that. Right? All right? They're just like do it. I can do the things that life gives you, because this is what life gives you. This is what life gives you. This is the gift of life. Now, there is a beautiful Midrash on Ecclesiastes, written by Yehuda Amichai, who was the great poet laureate of Israel. And his poetry, do you know Yehuda Amichai's poetry? It's very beautiful. The Hebrew is not difficult. If you can know a little bit of Hebrew, you can follow his poetry very easily. And he's a very interesting guy. He's a very wise man, but he's not one of these obscure poets you can't figure out, you know, with all the poetries in the footnotes. He's a poet. He's a poet of life. So he writes. This is his Midrash in Kohelet. A person, doesn't have time in his life to have time for everything. Kohelet said, to everything there is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven. Kohelet says nonsense. He doesn't have seasons enough to have a season for every purpose. Ecclesiastes was wrong about that. A man needs to love and to hate at the same moment, to laugh and cry with the same eyes, with the same hands to throw stones and gather them, to make love and war in love, to hate and forgive and remember and forget, to arrange and confuse, to eat and to digest what history takes years and years to do. A man doesn't have time. When he loses, he seeks. When he finds, he forgets. When he forgets, he loves. When he loves, he begins to forget. And his soul is seasoned. His soul is very professional. Only his body remains forever an amateur. It tries and it misses, gets muddled, doesn't learn a thing, drunk and blind in its pleasures and its pain. He will die, as figs die in autumn, shriveled and full of himself and sweet. The leaves growing dry on the ground, the bare branches pointing to the place where there's a time for everything. I think that's Rabbi Akiva's drush. What does Rabbi Akiva say? I want you to feel the full weight of your vulnerability as a finite human being. And I want you to have joy in life. And I want you to do the two things at the same time. So really quickly, because it's late, what were our 4 questions? Question number 1, Rabbi Gelman's wonderful question. Did we really live in booths?
No.
No. So what's the difference?
The rabbi simply...
Wait, hang on.
The rabbi simply transformed an agricultural chag that the priests had created to get money from the people and to exploit the workers. Because they had 2 chagim, they needed 3 for the year because of the 3 harvests. And the rabbis inherit this. Say, what are we going to do with this? And what they did is they did what you do. They made it metaphorical. They hated the priests, and they hated the chagim. And so they transformed a religion that was biblical Judaism into rabbinic Judaism, which is an entirely different thing. The truth of the matter is, there is no historical foundation for this. There is no, and they took the Exodus And they made it that each of us left Egypt. We didn't leave Egypt, but they transformed it in that way. This is a record of the transformation of Judaism into a rabbinic eyes.
Oh, very good. I think a little too cynical, but okay.
Maybe by a half.
I think this is a man who's been a congregational rabbi for a very long time. All right, so number one, but you saw the difference between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva's reading of the holiday. Rabbi Eliezer is a faithful Jew who looks up in the sky and sees God's hand protecting him. And Rabbi Akiva looks up in the sky, ironically, because he met a very difficult end, and sees, yes, God's hands may be there, but my life is very, very, very vulnerable. And still I have to find joy in the world. And that becomes, I think, the dominant, in the rabbinic tradition, Rabbi's exactly right, that becomes the dominant motif. The relationship between, we said, Pesach and springtime make a lot of sense, the liberation. And Shavuos and Sukkot, Shavuos, Pesach, Shavuos, first fruits and Torah makes a lot of sense because they're gifts of God. Harvest is a time of contingency. Because when I plant, I don't know what's going to come up. And if it comes up, I remember if you've ever been little kids and you remember you planted something in the backyard and the first ear of corn came up, and we'd grow corn in my backyard as kids. And it was like, wow, look what we did. It was the ugliest corn you ever saw in your life, but the best corn you ever saw in your life. Because it was amazing that it grows. And for the farmer to recognize, for all of us to recognize, that the things we own in life were not owed us. We're not entitled to any of this stuff. It's a gift. It comes as a gift. There's a huge note of contingency, of maybe, in everything that comes our way in life. That sense of dependency and vulnerability is the story of the Exodus from Egypt. To have crossed the desert for 40 years and depended on God's grace every day that there'd be manna, and depend on finding water in the desert. That sense of contingency and dependency and vulnerability, and to leave my very, very secure, air-conditioned, secured, alarmed house and go live in a hut in my backyard is to feel that, And then finally, the last piece, which is the relationship between the holidays. Hang on just a second. Judy, you want to add something?
Yeah, to what you said.
I'm on a roll here.
Yeah, I know, but when you said it comes as a gift, the gift is from God.
Yes.
So in essence, the two rabbis are saying the same thing,
Not
that it
quite.
all comes from
I
God.
think that
And
one
it
of
goes
them,
back
I
to
think,
Deuteronomy,
you're
and
right.
Moses is saying
Of
it.
course, they're both very deep believers, but I think the belief, I think Rabbi Akiva has a much more, I wouldn't say realistic, but he's much more sensitive to the vulnerabilities of being human than Rabbi Eliezer. Right? This idea that I look up and there's this cloud of God's glory protecting me all my life. I know people like that. I wish I had that kind of security. Right? I wish but I don't, because to me, I think Rabbi Akiva's right. It's a pretty dangerous world.
But every time you say it comes as a gift, the gift is from...
Yes, no question. It comes from beyond. There's no question. And the last thing is, and I'll urge you to take a minute, if you have a minute. So Alan Liu was a rabbi in San Francisco for many years, and he tragically passed away a few years ago. Before that, he was a Buddhist monk. This is a true story. I mean, the guy was a Buddhist monk, and the story was he just got ordained as a Buddhist priest, and he was literally sewing the thing onto his costume. He had an emblem that he got, a patch that he gets to sew onto his costume that shows that he's a Buddhist priest. And with every stitch, he heard a voice saying, "Alan, you're a Jew." No, this is his story. He tells the story. And he went to his Roshi, who's his Rebbe, his Rebbe, and he says, every time I hear a story, every time I give a stitch, it says I'm a Jew. What should I do? And the Roshi says, well, go become a rabbi. So he did. And he was a rabbi in San Francisco for many years, and he wrote a very beautiful book about these holidays. It's called This is Real and You're Not Prepared. And what he does is he draws a picture from Tisha B'Av in the summer, when we commemorate the destruction of the holy temples, through Elul, the month of repentance, through Rosh Hashanah, the beginning of our season of Tshuva, through the climax at Yom Kippur, right? When we break down all of the things that we depend upon, and we recognize that we are that we're very contingent, very vulnerable human beings. And then, before we rush back to our homes and the normal lives that we live, we walk into a halfway house. And that what the tradition says is, okay, now that you understand your vulnerability, now what I want you to do is to celebrate. Because you still have the gift of life. And as long as you have the gift of life, then there's what to celebrate. And he has, the line is quite beautiful here. If you just take a quick look. He says what a sukkah does is remind us about what a house really is. But it reminds us that no house can protect us. That no house can protect us. Right? Look at the last paragraph. In a sukkah, a house that is open to the world, a house that freely acknowledges that it cannot be the basis of our security, we let go of our need for security. The illusion of protection falls away. And suddenly we are flush with our life, feeling our life, following our life, doing its dance, one step after another. You go outside, you gather the people you love around you, you put a meal on the table, you drink a glass of wine, and you say, yeah, it's tough being a human being, but tonight I have the people I love around me, and life is good. V'samachta b'chagecha. And that bittersweetness is the last taste of the holidays. Until Simchas Torah comes, when we begin the year all over again with a song and a dance. Have a wonderful Chag. Mark, are you here on the 1st of November, the week?